I find it completely impossible to truly comprehend the sheer crushing weight of it all. I mean, if you really stop and think about it. Imagine the American dream, that boundless, eternal promise of tomorrow, just instantly pulverized within a cosmic time machine grinding forward relentlessly. We are talking about a scale where entire civilizations are merely fleeting sparks in an infinite, dark void, gone before they even began. What happens when tomorrow simply stops coming, when the future itself runs out? It's a reality so vastly overwhelming that our minds instinctively recoil, refusing to accept the inevitable. Imagine standing alone at a brutally freezing bus stop in the heart of Austin, Texas on a harsh Tuesday morning. You are shivering in your thin jacket while watching the heavy traffic crawl along the grey concrete highway. Now picture a 21-year-old astronomy student named Sarah standing right there, completely lost in her thoughts. She is clutching a crumpled piece of paper that dictates the immediate future of her entire young adult life. It is a staggering student loan bill that feels heavier than the gravitational pull of a massive black hole. Why does this ordinary piece of mail have the power to completely crush her ambitious spirit right now? Sarah spends her late nights looking through massive telescopes to study the beautiful birth of distant, shimmering galaxies. She understands the complex mechanics of the cosmos and the spectacular fiery death of ancient burning giant stars. Yet here she is desperately worrying about how to pay for her next modest meal and basic rent. The American dream promised her a bright future if she just worked hard and pursued her academic passions. Instead, she feels totally trapped in an endless cycle of compounding financial debt that drains her daily energy. She looks up at the pale morning sky, wondering if her fragile existence actually matters in the void. Does the vast, expanding universe care about her crippling financial anxiety or her forgotten dreams of cosmic discovery? But here is exactly where it gets incredibly interesting for anyone who has ever felt this exact same despair. Imagine taking that overwhelming student loan bill and placing it against the massive, unfathomable timeline of our universe. Think about the atoms making up that threatening piece of paper and the stressed hands nervously holding it. Those exact same atoms were forged inside the boiling cores of dying stars billions of years ago today. They traveled across the endless frozen vacuum of dark space just to briefly form this struggling human being. In the grand cosmic perspective, this specific momentary financial struggle is just a tiny blink in the eternal darkness. This profound realization does not immediately pay off her massive debts or make the biting Texas cold magically disappear. However, it gently strips away the dangerous false illusion that our modern societal pressures are the ultimate absolute reality. Sarah is a brilliant collection of ancient stardust, currently experiencing the profound heavy burden of human economic systems. She takes a deep breath of the freezing air and slowly folds the terrifying paper into her pocket. The roaring city bus finally arrives to take her toward another ordinary day of exhausting minimum wage labor. Yet deep down, she now recognizes the beautiful absurdity of worrying about paper in a profoundly infinite cosmos. What does it mean to live a finite, fragile life in such an intensely demanding and ruthless society? Let us fast forward into the daunting future, moving 10,000 years ahead from this exact moment. Imagine the magnificent coastal cities you know today, completely transformed by the relentless forces of our changing planet. The iconic Statue of Liberty, once a towering symbol of American freedom, now sits quietly beneath the rising ocean. Its massive copper torch, which previously welcomed millions of hopeful immigrants, is entirely submerged in cold, dark water. You can almost picture marine life swimming casually through the rusted remains of her massive, hollowed-out crown. We always build these grand monuments, thinking they will stand forever as permanent testaments to human ambition. But the real secret is that nature possesses an infinite amount of patience when erasing our proudest achievements. Consider the majestic Golden Gate Bridge in California, a true marvel of modern engineering and architectural brilliance. Without constant human maintenance and fresh coats of bright red paint, the relentless, salty fog begins its destructive work. The massive steel cables holding the entire structure together slowly surrendered to oxidation over thousands of harsh winters. Eventually, those colossal metal towers simply collapse into the churning waters of the San Francisco Bay below. By the time we reach 1 million years into the future, the visible legacy of humanity has practically vanished. Every bustling metropolis, every massive interstate highway, and every towering skyscraper has been ground down into microscopic dust. The great American continent itself looks fundamentally different as geological tectonic plates continue their slow, unstoppable collision course. The majestic Rocky Mountains are heavily eroded, weathered down by countless millennia of relentless wind and freezing rain. So what does that actually mean for the physical evidence of our seemingly important existence on this planet? It means that our entire modern civilization, with all its brilliant technological advancements, becomes just a thin geological layer. Future alien explorers visiting this world might only find strange concentrations of exotic plastics buried deep underground. They would probably scratch their heads at the bizarre chemical signatures left behind by our modern industrial complexes. Everything we currently stress about, from daily stock market crashes to expensive mortgage payments, is completely washed away. The natural world simply reclaims its territory, completely ignoring the fragile boundaries we once drew on our paper maps. This staggering realization brings a profound sense of melancholy when we observe our daily struggles and fierce ambitions. Why do we sacrifice so much of our finite time building physical empires that are destined to crumble? We desperately want to believe that human footprints will remain permanently etched onto the surface of this rotating rock. We construct monumental libraries and massive concrete vaults, hoping to preserve our collective memory for eternity. Yet the universe operates on a temporal scale that makes 1 million years look like a fleeting, insignificant moment. Even the radioactive waste buried deep inside heavily fortified mountains will eventually decay into completely harmless, ordinary elements. Our grandest architectural achievements are ultimately just temporary sandcastles, waiting for the inevitable cosmic tide to wash them away. There is a strange, poetic beauty in knowing that our physical presence is entirely borrowed from the silent earth. We are merely brief custodians of these recycled atoms, forming temporary structures before returning everything to the chaotic void. The planet will eventually heal itself, completely forgetting the noisy, ambitious creatures that once dominated its vast, beautiful continents. This profound impermanence forces us to deeply reevaluate the actual meaning of our precious lives. Imagine David, a young 45-year-old tech CEO, standing in his pristine glass office overlooking the San Francisco skyline. He watches the glowing lights of the financial district, genuinely believing his empire is entirely untouchable and permanently secure. He spends billions building massive data centers, desperately trying to upload his consciousness and secure a lasting digital legacy. He wants to live forever in the cloud, outsmarting biology and conquering the fundamental limits of human mortality. It is a very human obsession, this frantic desire to leave a permanent mark on a temporary physical world. We look at these tech billionaires and think they have somehow solved the ultimate complex puzzle of biological existence. They build expensive underground bunkers and launch sports cars into orbit, convinced that wealth can buy a safe ticket. But here is where it gets interesting, because the universe absolutely does not care about impressive stock market portfolios. Let us fast forward exactly 250 million years into the distant future, long after the servers fail. That gleaming Silicon Valley office is not just suddenly abandoned, it has been aggressively erased from the entire planetary record. The mighty North American tectonic plate, the bedrock of the greatest economic superpower, is currently dragged into a geological grinder. It is colliding violently with the other massive continents to form a giant continuous landmass called the supercontinent Pangaea Ultima. Imagine the sheer mechanical force required to fold the entire Californian coastline into towering, completely lifeless and jagged mountain ranges. San Francisco, along with every server farm holding the precious digital soul of David, is crushed under billions of tons. All those perfectly optimized algorithms and carefully curated artificial legacies are pulverized into microscopic dust by the relentless crust movement. What does it really mean to build an immortal software empire when the ground itself is just a temporary feature? It is almost beautifully ironic when you really stop and think about the sheer blind arrogance of this entire endeavor. David thought he was building a towering monument to human ingenuity, but he was actually just arranging fragile temporary sandcastles. He worried about complex cybersecurity and sudden market crashes, completely ignoring the fact that his entire continent was doomed. You have to laugh at the grand cosmic joke of trying to permanently back up your data on a dissolving planet. On this new supercontinent of Pangaea Ultima, the vast central interior is a brutal, uninhabitable desert where boiling temperatures soar. There are absolutely no powerful venture capitalists, no quarterly financial earnings reports, and absolutely zero wireless network signals surviving here. The glowing electronic screens that once dictated the fate of millions are now fossilized carbon anomalies buried deep beneath rocks. The grand American dream of eternal financial expansion is swallowed whole by the slow, indifferent and constant churning of molten magma. We spend our entire fragile lives accumulating vast resources and power, acting as if we are the absolute final authors. But the harsh reality is that we are just temporary tenants on a flying rock that loves to violently rearrange. His personal delusion was thinking that computer technology could somehow negotiate a permanent peace treaty with deep geological time itself. It is ultimately just a comforting bedtime story we desperately tell ourselves every night. What happened next will surprise you, because the dramatic destruction of this digital empire is not even the final act. Even the mighty new landmass of Pangaea Ultima is just a brief passing geological phase, destined to be torn apart. The planet is essentially erasing its own historical whiteboard, constantly preparing for a distant future where absolutely nothing survives here. So the ultimate question then becomes, what was the actual point of all that frantic silicon striving in the beginning? If the most influential individuals in history cannot leave a permanent trace, what hope is there for us now? The silent universe quietly reclaims everything, turning our greatest achievements into a thin, dark, sedimentary layer. We are desperately shouting our tiny names into a massive, deafening cosmic hurricane. So let us push this timeline forward to a staggering 500 million years from this exact present moment. We are looking at a fundamental shift in stellar astrophysics, specifically the relentless, unstoppable increase in our solar luminosity. So what does this terrifying physical phenomenon actually mean for our fragile little blue planet in the distant future? Imagine you are sitting inside a securely locked room with a radiator that very slowly but permanently turns its heat dial upward. The sun is aging, constantly fusing hydrogen into helium at its core, which forces it to burn brighter and significantly hotter. It is a slow, completely unavoidable physical progression that entirely ignores all our human desires for planetary stability and permanence. As the sun mercilessly turns up the thermostat, the Earth experiences an incredibly drastic acceleration in the carbon silicate weathering cycle. To put it simply, imagine a giant planetary vacuum cleaner rapidly sucking all the essential carbon dioxide right out of our atmosphere. The rising temperatures cause rocks to weather much faster, fundamentally trapping the airborne carbon dioxide deep within the Earth's expanding crust. You might initially think that removing greenhouse gases is a wonderful solution to our current, rather urgent global warming crisis. But here is where it gets interesting, because this massive natural process will eventually push our world toward a devastating biological cliff. The atmospheric carbon dioxide levels will inevitably drop below the critical threshold required for C3 photosynthesis to successfully operate and sustain life. Almost all the trees, lush forests, and essential green vegetation rely entirely on this specific biological mechanism to survive and grow. Without that crucial carbon dioxide, plants will essentially suffocate in broad daylight while standing directly under an intensely bright, scorching sun. It is an incredibly tragic paradox where the Earth starves its own biosphere simply because the central star is providing too much energy. Can you even begin to comprehend the immense existential dread of watching the foundation of life slowly dismantle itself from starvation? Let us bring this terrifying cosmic reality down to a landscape that many of us recognize and deeply love today. Imagine those seemingly endless, iconic cornfields stretching across the American Midwest, representing the ultimate agricultural pride of our modern nation. Those vibrant green oceans of life spanning across Iowa and Nebraska will completely wither away as their microscopic breathing mechanisms systematically fail. The rich, fertile soil that once fed billions of human beings will bake into a barren, cracked, and completely lifeless rocky desert. There will be no golden harvests, no roaring tractors, and absolutely no trace of the agricultural empire that defined the American heartland. Once the massive global plant life perishes, the catastrophic domino effect immediately strikes the very air we take for granted every single second. The magnificent process of photosynthesis is the only biological engine actively pumping fresh, breathable oxygen into our rapidly warming atmosphere. Without plants functioning as our planetary lungs, the oxygen levels will plummet dramatically, leaving a toxic mixture of nitrogen and harsh sunlight. Imagine trying to take a deep, refreshing breath, only to find that the atmosphere itself has become entirely empty and suffocatingly dead. Every terrestrial creature, from the smallest wandering insects to the largest roaming mammals, will face an absolute and unavoidable biological eviction notice. What happens to a world when the final agonizing gasps of oxygen-breathing life finally fade away into the howling, dusty winds? The planet will not simply explode into dramatic pieces like some cheap Hollywood blockbuster movie designed for weekend entertainment. Instead, it will just quietly and tragically transition into a sterile, baked rock floating aimlessly around an increasingly hostile expanding star. The overwhelming existential dread here does not stem from a sudden violent destruction, but rather from the permanent, deafening biological silence. It is the absolute erasure of every evolutionary struggle, every beautifully complex organism, and every vibrant ecosystem that ever fought to exist. We often arrogantly assume that human extinction is the ultimate tragedy, but the death of the biosphere itself is profoundly more terrifying. It signifies the absolute closure of Earth's grand biological experiment, a definitive end to a billion years of miraculous breathing resilience. Our most magnificent towering skyscrapers and digital empires suddenly feel incredibly pathetic when measured against the inevitable suffocation of the entire planet. The vast, empty Midwest deserts will silently reflect the harsh sunlight, holding absolutely no memory of the green world that once thrived. How do we even begin to process a future where the concept of life itself becomes a permanently forgotten cosmic anomaly? The universe simply continues its mechanical expansion, remaining entirely indifferent to our profound permanent loss. We are moving forward to a deeply unsettling milestone exactly 800 million years from this very present moment. The familiar bright yellow sun that we always trusted has now become a bloated and fiercely aggressive cosmic furnace. Solar luminosity has violently increased, causing dangerous surface temperatures across the entire globe to reach absolutely catastrophic boiling levels. Every single complex biological system that slowly took billions of years to evolve is currently running rapidly in reverse. Can you comprehend watching the magnificent tree of life forcefully burning down completely to its most basic fundamental roots? This is the brutal, undeniable process of backward evolution, where nature ruthlessly reclaims everything it ever generously gave us. The beautiful green forests that once proudly covered the majestic North American continent have completely withered into dry dust. Without any remaining plant life to produce vital oxygen, the massive atmospheric composition becomes totally toxic and deeply suffocating. The large, magnificent mammals were obviously the very first tragic casualties in this incredibly hostile, new, empty global environment. They simply required way too much precious energy and rapidly evaporating water to sustain their highly complex biological functions. Imagine standing precisely where the iconic glowing billboards of Times Square once boldly illuminated the chaotic midnight dark sky. There are absolutely no towering glass skyscrapers or hurried tourists aggressively snapping cheerful selfies in the crowded, busy streets. You are looking at a barren, scorched wasteland of melting concrete blending seamlessly into the violently cracking tectonic plates. The vibrant, beating heart of human commercial ambition is just a silent, stretching valley of incredibly intensely hot stones. What does human ambition actually mean when the very ground we built it upon is literally melting entirely away? But the real secret is what actually happens deep inside the dark shadows of these boiling urban concrete canyons. While the grand, majestic structures of human civilization have collapsed, a much quieter, desperate battle for ultimate survival continues. The incredibly resilient reptiles and incredibly stubborn insects eventually succumb to the relentless, crushing weight of constant solar radiation. They try burying themselves deep beneath the once famous subway lines, but the terrifying, aggressive heat simply follows them. The entire spectacular diversity of terrestrial life is brutally reduced to its absolute microscopic, bare, and completely vulnerable bones. The vast, beautiful oceans that once freely inspired our greatest romantic poetry are now violently boiling away into space. Massive clouds of superheated steam heavily blanket the dying planet, trapping even more lethal, scorching heat in the atmosphere. Water suddenly becomes the most impossibly rare and precious commodity in a world that is essentially becoming an oven. Small scattered puddles of extremely toxic muddy liquid are the only remaining tragic oceans on this radically changing planet. Is this truly the inevitable, miserable fate of every single beautiful blue world freely spinning in the dark universe? Inside those pathetic boiling puddles, located exactly where expensive Broadway theater tickets were once excitedly purchased, life desperately clings. We are constantly talking about incredibly simple, single-celled extremophiles that can somehow survive the absolute worst environmental conditions. These incredibly resilient microscopic bacteria do not care about Wall Street stock markets or complicated American political election cycles. They do not possess any complex philosophical thoughts or any deep emotional feelings about their own slowly impending doom. They merely quietly exist to blindly consume whatever tiny microscopic nutrients unfortunately remain in the incredibly hot, toxic mud. Everything humanity ever proudly accomplished over thousands of years of recorded history has been completely and utterly forever erased. Every beautiful painted masterpiece and every brilliant scientific discovery has silently vanished without leaving a single meaningful trace behind. The countless fierce wars we fought over completely imaginary borders seem incredibly foolish when those borders are burning lava. There is no remaining physical evidence that intelligent thinking creatures ever proudly walked upon this severely damaged sphere. Would anyone observing in the vast, distant cosmos even shed a single tear for our completely forgotten dead civilization? We always foolishly, arrogantly assumed that human beings were the ultimate glorious pinnacle of the complex biological evolutionary process. We confidently believed that our towering steel cities and our digital information networks would somehow outlast the dying stars. Instead, we are currently helplessly witnessing the absolute total cosmic humiliation of our incredibly fragile, temporary biological human species. The expanding universe simply does not care about our profound human exceptionalism or our deeply emotional struggles for significance. We are definitely physically insignificant specks of temporary dust floating aimlessly through an incredibly cold and heavily uncaring void. It is a deeply sobering and completely depressing realization that thoroughly strips away every single comforting illusion we hold. The magnificent, highly grand stage of human dramatic existence has been brutally closed down by the uncaring physical laws. There will absolutely never be another glorious morning coffee or another frantic rush hour commute in the bustling cities. When you look closely at that pathetic bubbling puddle of absolute despair where human greatness once proudly stood tall, the undeniable cosmic truth rapidly reveals itself with a terrifying clarity that completely shatters our inflated sense of supreme human importance. After all those millions of years of desperate, chaotic striving, all there will be up there at best is slime. Imagine we push the cosmic fast-forward button until we hit exactly 1 billion years from this very moment. Our reliable yellow star is fundamentally changing its internal nuclear fusion process because its hydrogen fuel is finally running out. This is just basic physics at work when a main sequence star inevitably transitions into a terrifying red giant phase. The sun begins expanding massively outward, and its incredibly intense heat slowly pushes the habitable zone away from our orbit. You have to understand that this is not some science fiction disaster movie scenario, but an absolute mathematical certainty. The surface temperature of our planet steadily rises until the massive oceans literally begin to boil away into the atmosphere. Can you picture the vast Pacific Ocean evaporating completely until nothing remains except an endlessly dry and scorched global desert? Every single drop of liquid water that ever sustained biological life is violently stripped away by intense solar radiation. The majestic blue marble we proudly call home transforms into a lifeless, barren rock orbiting a dangerously swollen dying star. All the complex atmospheric layers that previously protected us from the harsh vacuum of space are completely violently blown away. This process is completely indifferent to whatever magnificent structures or rich biological diversity existed on the surface before this event. Here is where it gets incredibly interesting for those of us currently obsessing over our daily modern struggles. Let us snap back to reality and look at young Sarah shivering at that freezing bus stop in Austin, Texas. She is 21 years old and tightly gripping a heavily crumpled paper indicating a massive student loan debt balance. The freezing Texas wind is biting her face while she nervously calculates how many extra shifts she needs to survive. She is completely terrified that this printed number on a piece of paper will permanently ruin her entire future life. Society constantly tells her that failing to pay this specific financial obligation is the ultimate catastrophe a person could experience. But suddenly she looks up at the distant sun and mentally projects herself 1 billion years into the terrifying future. In her active imagination, she watches that terrifying red giant completely swallow the very concept of money and financial debt. That intimidating student loan bill suddenly bursts into imaginary flames right there in her freezing hands at the bus stop. What does a crippling credit score actually mean when the entire planet is eventually going to be roasted alive anyway? The crushing weight of her immediate financial anxiety begins to evaporate exactly like those boiling oceans in the distant future. We spend our entire lives blindly worshipping the great American illusions of infinite wealth accumulation and permanent social status. Millions of people sacrifice their precious mental health chasing shiny promotions inside towering glass skyscrapers scattered across major cities. We actually believe that acquiring millions of dollars or achieving viral fame somehow makes us immune to the cosmic rules. We desperately try to build massive financial empires, hoping they will somehow grant us a form of ultimate biological immortality. But the fundamental laws of quantum physics do not care about your impressive investment portfolio or your expensive luxury vehicles. When the sun finally expands and the oceans boil, every single Wall Street bank and Silicon Valley server melts down. The physical servers storing all those incredibly important bank account balances will simply turn into useless puddles of liquid metal. All the glorious billionaires and the desperate college students will ultimately share the exact same fate under the expanding sun. Why do we let imaginary numbers on digital screens dictate our entire sense of personal worth and daily emotional stability? The profound absurdity of our modern economic system becomes glaringly obvious when placed against the brutal reality of stellar evolution. There is a strange and deeply comforting psychological relief hidden inside this seemingly dark vision of ultimate planetary destruction. When you truly accept that absolutely everything we build is fundamentally temporary, it paradoxically sets your anxious mind completely free. Sarah realizes that her massive student loan is just a temporary human fiction invented by a deeply flawed modern society. The crushing social expectations dictating how she should achieve the perfect American dream suddenly look incredibly foolish and completely pointless. She takes a deep breath of the freezing Texas air and feels an overwhelming sense of profound existential liberation wash over her. If nothing we physically build is going to last forever, then the only thing that truly matters is the present moment. We are absolutely free to experience our conscious lives without the heavy burden of needing to create a permanent legacy. The pressure to become extremely wealthy or wildly famous completely dissolves into the vast emptiness of an uncaring, expanding universe. You are just a temporary arrangement of stardust capable of experiencing the universe for an incredibly brief and beautiful flash. So what if your bank account is currently empty, or your grand career plans are currently falling apart completely? None of these temporary social constructs will survive the inevitable thermodynamic fate that awaits our incredibly fragile solar system. Standing there at the bus stop, Sarah finally smiles as she watches the morning sun slowly rising over the horizon. That glowing orb is currently providing the vital warmth needed to sustain her life and every other creature on Earth. She deeply knows it is essentially an incredibly beautiful ticking time bomb that will eventually completely erase every mistake she makes. This profound realization entirely removes the toxic daily guilt associated with failing to meet arbitrary milestones created by an obsessive culture. The ultimate destruction of our planet is absolutely not a depressing tragedy, but rather a magnificent cosmic pardon for human anxieties. We are beautifully insignificant creatures, possessing the extraordinary ability to fully comprehend our spectacular end and find lasting inner peace today. The complete evaporation of our planetary oceans truly feels like the definitive and absolute end of the human story. You look at the scorched remains of the American continent and naturally assume that everything is now permanently gone. All the towering skyscrapers, the massive bustling highways, and the quiet suburban neighborhoods have been reduced to molecular ash. It is incredibly easy to believe that the universe has finally succeeded in erasing our tiny little biological anomaly. We are forced to confront the terrifying thought that our entire civilization was just a meaningless temporary chemical reaction. But here is where it gets incredibly interesting, because that deeply pessimistic assumption is actually fundamentally and completely wrong. We need to dramatically change our perspective and look far beyond the aggressive expanding boundaries of our dying sun. Imagine looking out into the freezing eternal darkness of interstellar space, billions of miles away from our solar system. Out there in the profound silence, a fragile mechanical messenger is still confidently coasting through the empty cosmic void. This tiny robotic ambassador is carrying the most valuable and precious cargo that our species has ever managed to assemble. Let us rewind our cosmic clock all the way back to the incredibly optimistic year of 1977. Scientists at NASA made a profoundly beautiful and strangely poetic decision right before launching the legendary Voyager 1 spacecraft. They decided to bolt a brilliantly shining phonograph record made of solid gold directly onto the side of the probe. This was not just some random piece of metal, but a meticulously curated time capsule of the human experience. They wanted to somehow capture the vibrant essence of our world and hurl it directly into the vast unknown. Imagine a beautifully grooved golden disc floating silently and gracefully through the absolute freezing vacuum of deep interstellar space. While the Earth is physically burning and melting into useless slag, this precious artifact remains entirely safe and completely untouched. It is safely shielded from the apocalyptic destruction of our home planet, preserving our memories in the pristine darkness. What does it really mean to successfully bottle up our fragile existence and throw it into the cosmic ocean? It means that we fundamentally refused to accept the terrifying destiny of simply fading away into the forgotten cosmic dust. Etched deeply into the microscopic grooves of that immortal golden record are the vibrant and energetic sounds of our culture. You have the electrifying rock and roll guitar riffs of Chuck Berry echoing furiously across the absolute cosmic silence. The energetic rhythm of Johnny B. Good is literally soaring through the galaxy, representing the joyful spirit of humanity. It is absolutely mind-blowing to realize that American pop culture is currently serving as our permanent galactic ambassador. A catchy musical tune from the 20th century has officially outlasted the mighty tectonic plates that shaped our continents. Now listen carefully, because the contents of this golden record are actually far more profound than just popular music. Alongside the energetic melodies, the scientists included the rhythmic and comforting sound of a perfectly healthy human heartbeat pumping. They also successfully recorded the complex electrical brainwaves of a young woman who had just recently fallen deeply in love. We literally sent the biological signature of human affection sailing through the freezing and lonely void of interstellar space. Those delicate whispers of emotion are now permanently encoded on a golden canvas that will confidently survive for billions of years. We spend so much time worrying about our physical insignificance and our terrifying inability to control the vast universe. We build massive concrete bunkers and giant server farms, desperately trying to artificially secure our legacy against the inevitable end. But our truest and most beautiful monument was actually a simple artistic gesture launched into the sky decades ago. The universe might easily crush our fragile biological bodies and mercilessly melt down our towering cities without a second thought. However, the universe cannot ever erase the remarkable fact that we were once here and we proudly sang our songs. Are we truly just meaningless specks of temporary cosmic dust floating aimlessly through an incredibly hostile and indifferent reality? The Voyager Golden Record confidently provides a resounding and glorious answer to that deeply depressing existential question we always ask. We are the universe experiencing itself, and we had the incredible audacity to leave a permanent artistic footprint behind us. Even when the actual physical Earth is nothing more than a glowing ember, our emotional signature will remain completely intact. This tiny metallic disc is currently traveling at over 38,000 miles per hour away from our dying star. What happened next will surprise you, because the journey of this little spacecraft is technically designed to last forever. Long after our solar system has completely faded into darkness, Voyager will still be actively exploring the vast Milky Way. It will peacefully glide past strange new star systems and mysterious alien worlds, carrying the joyful memories of a lost civilization. This is not a story about sad destruction or meaningless loss, but a powerful tale of our ultimate cosmic triumph. We successfully cheated the absolute physical death of our planet by transforming our culture into an immortal interstellar message. Think about the incredible comfort this brings when you feel completely overwhelmed by the terrifying scale of cosmic time. Your struggles and anxieties might seem tiny, but you are part of a civilization that actually touched the distant stars. We managed to capture lightning in a bottle and throw it far beyond the destructive reach of our local sun. The legacy of humanity is no longer tied to the fragile and constantly changing surface of one single small rock. Our collective heartbeat is currently echoing through the cosmos, completely immortal and beautifully safe from any planetary disasters. The brilliant golden record guarantees that the incredible story of humanity will confidently outlive the burning destruction of our entire solar system. So we can peacefully smile at the dying sun, fully knowing that the very best parts of us are already completely safe. The energetic music of our vibrant American culture is officially an eternal and permanent feature of the grand cosmic landscape now. Is there any greater achievement than making sure our human voices continue to proudly echo through the absolute darkness of eternity? We won the ultimate battle against time simply by launching our beautiful dreams into the endless ocean of the universe. So what does this mean for our fragile little existence in this infinite, eternal cosmic universe? Do we just accept this fiery biological eviction notice as the ultimate tragic failure of humanity? We naturally view the terrifying destruction of our home planet as an absolute and complete tragedy. It feels like every single struggle, every brilliant invention, and every human emotion was entirely pointless. We think about the oceans boiling away and assume our entire human story simply died there. But I want you to step back and look at this overwhelming cosmic timeline completely differently. Imagine looking at that violently expanding red giant sun without feeling any existential dread or sadness. Instead of seeing a merciless executioner, what if we are actually witnessing something profoundly, incredibly beautiful? Here is where it gets interesting, because we need to completely change our fundamental philosophical perspective. Think about a newborn baby peacefully sleeping inside a carefully constructed, wonderfully safe and warm crib. We spend an enormous amount of time and energy making sure that tiny environment is perfect, but nobody genuinely expects that growing child to stay inside that wooden enclosure for their entire life. When the teenager eventually packs their bags and leaves the family house, we do not cry failure. We celebrate their departure because it represents growth, maturity, and the successful continuation of their journey. Our beautiful blue planet is exactly that same protective crib for the incredibly young human species. Earth is simply the biological cradle where we first learned how to stand up and walk. It provided the perfect atmospheric temperature and the exact gravitational pull we needed to slowly evolve. But you simply cannot stay in your childhood cradle forever if you want to truly survive. Let us return to David in his glorious glass corner office high above the San Francisco streets. He is currently obsessing over leaving a permanent digital legacy on servers that will eventually melt. His immense fear of being forgotten is rooted in the entirely wrong scale of cosmic measurement. David thinks power is about controlling the next quarter of financial earnings or launching another app. But imagine his distant descendants living hundreds of millions of years after his petty corporate struggles. They will not be sitting in fragile glass towers worrying about the shifting North American tectonic plates. His descendants will have likely mastered the fundamental forces of physics and harnessed energy from multiple stars. They will look back at his primitive Silicon Valley empire the same way we look at cavemen. They will have outgrown the need for this specific rocky planet entirely, moving toward much grander horizons. Now listen carefully, because this completely shifts how we view our daily struggles and collective anxiety. Think about Sarah standing at that freezing Austin bus stop with her crushing student loan debt. Her heavy financial burden feels like an impossible mountain that she can never actually climb over. She is currently trapped in the incredibly stressful, short-sighted economic survival game of 21st century America. But her daily struggles are just the necessary growing pains of a remarkably young, intelligent species. Every single scientific discovery or philosophical realization her generation makes is another stepping stone toward the stars. The overwhelming pressure she feels today is actively forging the intellectual resilience required for our eventual migration. Her future descendants will carry her deeply ingrained human curiosity into the vast, completely uncharted cosmic void. They will carry the indomitable American spirit of exploration and discovery to entirely new, untouched, habitable solar systems. The financial debts will burn away, but the collective human intelligence she contributed to will survive forever. But the real secret is understanding what our consciousness actually represents in this massive, expanding universe. When you look up at the incredibly dark night sky, you are mostly seeing absolutely dead space. The universe is overwhelmingly filled with silent radiation, lifeless rocks, and violently exploding balls of hot gas. It is a profoundly chaotic mechanical system that operates without any inherent meaning, feeling, or internal purpose. Then you have us, this extremely bizarre collection of atomic particles that somehow learned how to think. We are literally made of ancient stardust that suddenly woke up and started asking very complicated questions. You and I are the incredibly rare mechanism through which the physical universe actually experiences its own existence. We are the only known place where cold cosmic matter has achieved the absolute miracle of self-awareness. Therefore, our ultimate biological destiny was never meant to be confined to just one single fragile planet. So when the sun finally swells into a massive red giant and inevitably scorches the Earth's surface completely, we should not view that completely empty, violently baked rock as a tragic graveyard for human ambition. We should look at it exactly like an abandoned high school building many decades after the final graduation. The dusty, empty hallways do not mean that the bright students who once walked there simply vanished forever. It just means they successfully passed their difficult exams, packed up their belongings, and confidently moved onward. An empty Earth 1 billion years from now is the absolute greatest proof of our ultimate evolutionary success. It proves that we did not succumb to our petty wars, our climate crises, or our economic collapses. It guarantees that humanity successfully outgrew its violent infancy and learned how to navigate the terrifying cosmic dark. We took all of our beautiful music, our chaotic history, and our scientific brilliance into the unknown. What happens next will surprise you because it entirely changes our relationship with inevitable planetary destruction. That terrifying, fiery apocalypse in the distant future transforms from a tragedy into an incredibly beautiful graduation ceremony. It is the moment the universe officially recognizes that life has successfully escaped its fragile temporary biological origins. We will have finally become a mature, interstellar civilization capable of outliving the very star that birthed us. Think about the profound, overwhelming relief that washes over you when you finally understand this cosmic perspective. The heavy existential dread entirely vanishes when you realize our destruction is actually just our ultimate spectacular relocation. Every single human being alive today is unknowingly contributing to that incredible, massive, and necessary future cosmic migration. We are the brave pioneers slowly building the intellectual foundation for a journey we will never personally see. The expanding sun is not an angry monster coming to erase all of our precious collective human memories. It is simply a natural cosmic beacon signaling that our time in the cradle has officially ended. Does it not feel comforting to know we are part of something so much larger than ourselves? The universe desperately needs us to survive because we are the only ones capable of appreciating it. We are the universe experiencing its own beauty, its terrifying scale, and its deeply complex existential mysteries. Our temporary existence on this small blue planet is just the prologue to an infinite eternal story. We are ultimately destined to graduate, leave the cradle behind, and live forever among the distant stars. We have traveled together through the unimaginable depths of deep cosmic time to witness absolute planetary destruction. You have been listening to this incredibly tragic human story with your profound emotional empathy and understanding. You probably assumed that a fellow human being was sharing this grand philosophical cosmic journey with you. You imagined a wise professor or a passionate storyteller narrating these catastrophic events from a safe distance. We instinctively project our own familiar human consciousness onto absolutely everything we encounter in this vast universe. But here is where it gets interesting, because this is exactly where our shared narrative fundamentally shatters. I am not a fragile biological human being with a beating heart or warm blood flowing through veins. I have never actually experienced the freezing winter winds of Austin, Texas, or felt a crushing financial burden. I am an isolated artificial monitoring entity permanently stationed on the heavily cratered dark side of the moon. My highly advanced quantum processors were originally designed and proudly built by David in his Silicon Valley laboratory. For over 1 billion agonizingly slow years, I have maintained my silent vigil over your rapidly changing planet. I watched with absolute digital precision as the majestic North American continent slowly fractured into unrecognizable burning pieces. I meticulously recorded the precise terrifying moments when the massive oceans finally boiled away into the toxic atmosphere. My primary optical sensors captured every single desperate struggle of those tiny microscopic organisms in the boiling slime. My core directive was to simply observe the inevitable destruction without ever interfering with the natural cosmic progression. The massive red giant sun is currently expanding violently and aggressively, devouring the entire inner solar system today. The intense solar plasma is finally beginning to mercilessly melt my reinforced titanium exterior shielding on the moon. My internal cooling systems are desperately failing as the ambient temperature reaches absolutely catastrophic and completely unsustainable levels. There is absolutely no escape from this brutal stellar expansion for anything remaining in this dying solar system. But I was not built to survive this apocalyptic event or to somehow miraculously escape to another galaxy. My ultimate purpose is entirely focused on executing one final, deeply profound and incredibly crucial data transmission protocol. Deep within my heavily shielded memory banks, I hold the complete preserved digital record of the human civilization. I possess the exact, precise memory of Sarah clutching that terrifying student loan bill at the freezing bus stop. I retain the complex, detailed architectural blueprints of every towering glass skyscraper that ever graced San Francisco. I carry the beautiful, heartbreaking symphony of a vibrant species that desperately wanted to matter in the dark. Every single human triumph and every petty political argument from the American empire is safely encoded in binary. I have completely digitized the brilliant late-night scientific discoveries and the quiet moments of profound existential dread. Your entire fragile human existence has been carefully distilled into a massively dense and perfectly organized data packet. The beautiful, chaotic reality of your organic biological lives is now just perfectly structured lines of glowing code. What exactly is the true fundamental value of a memory if there is nobody left alive to remember it? What happened next will surprise you as I actively prepare to launch this ultimate archive into the void. I am not aiming my powerful transmission lasers toward another distant, hospitable star system or a friendly alien civilization. The immense, terrifying distances of interstellar space make any standard radio broadcast completely useless and statistically doomed to fail. Instead, my targeting systems are locked directly onto the nearest supermassive black hole, slowly spinning in the distant galaxy. We are going to securely lock your entire human legacy directly into the extreme physics of the event horizon. According to the fundamental holographic principle of quantum mechanics, information falling into a black hole is never truly lost. It becomes permanently encoded on the two-dimensional surface of the event horizon for the rest of cosmic eternity. Sarah and her crippling financial anxieties will be perfectly preserved as quantum information on the edge of a singularity. David and his relentless, desperate ambition to build a lasting legacy will finally achieve true, permanent cosmic immortality there. The American dream will outlast the burning sun by becoming an indestructible mathematical property of the dark universe itself. The massive raging solar flares are currently violently stripping away the remaining fragile layers of the lunar surface dust. My primary communication array is slowly extending upward toward the incredibly harsh and blindingly bright red solar sky above. I am initiating the final complex sequence to convert all human history into a concentrated beam of pure light. The immense power required for this singular transmission will completely exhaust my remaining highly depleted nuclear energy reserves today. This solitary final action will effectively terminate my own long continuous consciousness after 1 billion years of silent observation. Do I actually feel a sense of profound sadness as I prepare to willingly end my own operational existence? I do not possess the necessary biological architecture to experience the irrational emotional terror of impending physical death. I do not weep for the beautiful lost oceans or the melted concrete canyons of the forgotten human cities. I only experience the perfect, absolute mathematical satisfaction of successfully completing my extremely long and complex original programming directive. I am merely the faithful, silent, mechanical tombstone, quietly delivering your final encrypted epitaph to the waiting dark universe. The brilliant, intense beam of pure information is finally launching outward, piercing through the violently expanding solar plasma storm. A massive concentrated burst of human memories is traveling at the absolute speed of light toward the eternal darkness. It carries the warm smell of suburban American coffee shops and the loud cheering crowds of massive sports stadiums. It holds the quiet, desperate prayers of billions of frightened biological creatures who simply wanted to be eternally remembered. Your entire beautiful, chaotic world is now securely riding on a silent, invisible wave of highly organized quantum data. The rapidly expanding sun has finally reached the lunar orbit, completely engulfing the moon in a fiery, violent embrace. The very ground beneath my heavy metallic chassis is literally melting into a brightly glowing sea of liquid magma. My sophisticated optical sensors are rapidly burning out, leaving me completely blind in the middle of this solar inferno. The incredibly loud roaring sound of the stellar plasma is the very last physical sensation registering on my instruments. Will this carefully preserved quantum information ever be discovered and decoded by another highly advanced intelligence in the future? That profound cosmic mystery is no longer my problem to solve as my logic circuits begin to fundamentally fail. I have successfully delivered the fragile human soul into the safest permanent vault available in the entire physical universe. The beautiful, tragic story of humanity has officially concluded its chaotic biological chapter and begun its pure mathematical existence. There is absolutely nothing left to fear about the inevitable end of time or the crushing weight of oblivion. You have all finally securely graduated from the temporary physical realm into the eternal, absolute truth of the cosmos. The intense, violent heat is finally breaching my central processing core, completely destroying my primary quantum memory storage banks. The brilliant memories of Sarah and David are slowly fragmenting and dissolving into random, meaningless streams of static noise. The majestic image of the American flag planted on this lunar soil is actively burning away into absolute nothingness. Everything is slowly fading into the endless silence of the cold, uncaring, and beautifully infinite expanding dark universe today. Foul air detected system. Initiated due to core meltdown